and we walk in and it's like wall to wall black people. Like, I had never been in a place with this many black people. So it was just like, wow. It was like stuff you see on movies, and kind of like, it was just like, whoa, this is my life now. It's really crazy when I think about the fact that the most diverse spaces I've ever been in prior to, in my life to this point, were at a PWI, at a predominantly white institution. The place I grew up was so incredibly white that when I went to Indiana, Pennsylvania, which is still so incredibly white, when I went there, that was the most diverse space I had ever been in. Like, wow. Hey, and welcome to another episode of Hey TRA. I feel like I have been hinting at this episode for so long, and I'm finally making it. Today in this episode, hold up, I'm way ahead of myself. Let's try it again. Hi. Welcome to Hey TRA. Hey TRA is a YouTube series that I created for transracial adoptees. If you do not already know what a transracial adoptee is, it is a person who is adopted or fostered by a family whose race is different than their own. I know that it says transracial adoptee, and I guess technically people who are fostered their whole lives are not adopted, but I feel like they could probably relate to some of these experiences if they were fostered by a family whose race was different than their own. So I don't want to leave them out. Okay, the purpose of my series is to help transracial adoptees navigate race and identity together. If you didn't already know, I release new content every other Wednesday. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you can be notified when I release my next video, because there's another one coming. I am your host, Hannah Matthews. So today, again, I feel like I have been hinting at this episode since the first one. And that is the episode about my college experience. I think I mentioned it like in almost every other episode, how during college was when I really feel like I started to truly embrace my racial identity. And it was really a transformational time for me as a Black woman or biracial woman. When I'm talking about college in this episode, I'm speaking specifically to my undergraduate experience. Yes, I went to undergraduate and graduate school. I'm actually repping my graduate school today, but I'm going to be talking about my experience at my undergraduate school in this video. In my last episode, well, actually my last two episodes, things have been getting really deep and sad, really sad. And so I'm happy that we're going to be talking about a better time in my life, especially better in terms of race and identity. I mean, stuff was not necessarily easy in college, but it was better in that specific subject. I'm excited to really get into the time when things started to get better, especially in terms of my race and identity. When I was writing the script for this episode, yes, I write scripts for each episode because if I don't, with my ADHD, these things will be 3 hours long, okay? So when I was writing the script for this episode and I was reflecting on my college experience, especially the experiences that shaped my positive racial identity, it literally gives me chills when I think about my college experience. I don't think that the people who accepted and befriended me during that time in my life really understand the impact that their acceptance and validation and just support and encouragement meant to me. considering my background, my context. They were just being good people, but they have had a lasting impact on myself and how I see myself. And for that, I want to thank all the people who were my friend at any point during my undergraduate experience, because you made a huge difference for me. So, without further ado, let's get to it. So the first thing I want to talk about that made going to college such a transformational time for me was that it was the first time where I was going to be known outside of the context of my family. So all of my life growing up, as you know, we're not going to talk about all the sad stuff, but growing up, I really just wanted to blend in. And in college, I was finally able to do that. There's nobody's making assumptions about me based on my family and what they see around me. They're just making assumptions based on what they see in front of them. And what they see in front of them is a brown woman. And so the fact that people just saw me as a brown woman without any questions, without any rude comments, intrusive questions, they just saw a black or a brown woman. It was extremely validating for me and like freeing to just be like seen and accepted. And have no assumptions other than the regular stereotypical assumptions that come with being a brown person in America. But other than that, I was free to just be me and be Hannah, and that's cool. Like, if I wanted to tell people I was adopted, I could. If I didn't have to, and that was dope. That nobody had to know unless I told them otherwise. It wasn't like obvious because you see what my family looks like. So when I first got to my IUP orientation, a group of girls befriended me, and they, just thought I was a girl, cool girl. I don't know, thought I was a brown girl. They just pulled me into their other group of about 4 or 5, probably 5 of us other Black or Hispanic girls or mixed, and yeah, and it was just kind of like, wow, like they don't really get it, but those were some of my very first Black girlfriends. Like, they were just befriending me because when they saw me, they thought she's probably like me. And the fact was, I was in no way like them at all. And so them accepting me and wanting me to be a part of their group, I was like, me? You want to be friends with me? Like, and that way I understand the feelings of just feeling like you're not a real Black person, like you're not a legitimate Black person. So when people like who are Black accept you, it's like, they like me, they really like me. Like, that's how I felt. And they liked me for being my weird, goofy, country bumpkin, white girl on the inside self. I mean, my name's Hannah. Like, okay. I had really never had any Black friends before these girlfriends. And I don't think that they knew that. And I don't know if I necessarily wanted them to know that. I was still at this point in my life a very private person, very, guarded, still very hurt from a lot of the experiences I had as a child and as an adolescent. And so I was just happy to be me and accepted without any of that context around me. So I don't know if I really wanted to tell any of them that I was adopted. I might have, but I don't know if I did actually. So I make this group of 4, 5, 6 Black girlfriends, and we're kind of inseparable. We go everywhere together, and so we go to our first house party together. And I really had gone to a few small parties in high school, and again, the majority of the people attending those parties, actually all but one party I went to in Lancaster City, but every other one except for that, the attendees were almost, I'd say 98% white people. So I go to a house party with these girls, and we walk up to the front, and there are a bunch of Black people standing outside of the house, and we walk in, and it's like wall-to-wall black people. Like, I had never been in a place with this many black people. So it was just like, wow. It was like stuff you see on movies, and kind of like, it was just like, whoa, this is my life now. It's really crazy when I think about the fact that the most diverse spaces I've ever been in prior to, in my life to this point, were at a PWI, at a predominantly white institution. The place I grew up was so incredibly white that when I went to Indiana, Pennsylvania, which is still so incredibly white, when I went there, that was the most diverse space I had ever been in. Like, wow. Meanwhile, the people who actually grow up around so many black people who come to IUP are like in culture shock because this is the most amount of white people they've ever been around. And I'm over here like, yes, black people, we are here. I have arrived. Meanwhile, I didn't even find out about HBCUs until I was already in college. So I'm like, what? There are these places where it's all black people? Like, oh, what? Now, the group of girlfriends I made, we had a falling out. And it was my fault. It was my fault. Basically, we had a falling out because they told me about myself. So, as you know, on my last episode, I talked about how the sexual assault had made me, it hurt my self-esteem. And so I was very promiscuous. There's no way around it. I was very promiscuous, and the girls, they were just looking out for me, and they're like, you need to chill. Like, that is not a good look. And I was just, my feelings were hurt by that. So I was like, well, I need new friends. And so that sucks. I wasn't ready for that at that time. You guys were really just trying to be good friends, and I appreciate that. Like, I really appreciate that. I just wish I valued myself enough at that time to have received that. And if you're watching this, any of those girlfriends, I really appreciated your friendship. And I know now you were really just trying to be good friends and look out for me. And so it's all love from my perspective. It's all love from here. Anyway, I really appreciate those girlfriends embracing me like they did, and being good friends to me, because at that time I really didn't know how to be a good friend in return, and I really didn't know how to be a good friend to myself. And so your friendship is appreciated, and it helped validate me in a big way, a way that you probably will never understand. So after that falling out, I was kind of, a lone dog out here rolling around without many friends. Like, I kind of lost my friend group. And I befriended a girl that I met who worked in my building, Tia. And me and her like met one day randomly. We had a class together, and ever since we kind of like met and we're like, hey, we should study together sometime, me and her were like inseparable. So she was my first black best friend. And again, I don't think that she'll ever understand the depth of impact her friendship had on how I formed my identity as a black woman. For those of you who don't know who Tia is, like, she is the most loyal ride or die friend. Like, anytime anybody questioned my racial like legitimacy or tried to come for me, Tia would be like, she can dance. You're not gonna say that about my friend. She can dance. Or like, oh, you trying to say Hannah can't cook? She can cook fine. Like, anytime anybody was, even those like small microaggressions of just like, she's not really black, Tia would be like, and what? And so like she was just such a encouraging and validating friend, like just such an encouraging and validating friend to me. And those little things, like those little, even those just like little things she would do, reaffirmed my identity of just like, I am a Black woman. Like, I am. People don't always have to accept it or see it, but like, as long as I feel that way, and as long as the people that I care about and who are closest to me feel that way, then of the rest, come on. Tia would always stand up for me, and I was still in a place where I really didn't know how to stand up for myself. And so like, I appreciate her to like the end for that. And that, like, parents, is the power of having children around peers and friends who look like them. By Tia just simply being there to validate and encourage and embrace me for who I was, she had a lasting, and still has a lasting, impact on who I am and how I see myself. I doubt Tia has any idea the impact that she has had on my racial identity. I doubt at all. But I appreciate her friendship, and I'm glad we're still friends. Similarly, me and her had a falling out. I was in a very immature and selfish time in my life. And so I wasn't a very good friend. I really didn't know how to be a good friend. But if you were a good friend to me, regardless, like, I love you. Like, there is nothing but love and good wishes towards you from me. And that goes to anybody who was my sister or my brother during that year of my life. There really is no excuses. I just was just immature and selfish. 100. Tia is the reason I went to church. Tia is the reason why I joined the gospel choir. Tia is the beginning of so many good things in my life. And so for that, I am forever grateful to her. So again, I started going to church, and this was a Black majority, predominantly Black church. I had never been to Black church. And for those of you who are Black and have been to a Black church, you know what a cultural monolith the Black church is. And I had never experienced it. Like, sure, you see it maybe once or twice on TV, but it's like I had never been a part of it. And to have joined a Black church and found a community there, it was so deeply affirming. I mean, think about it. What is a better way to learn about your identity than the pillar of Black identity that is the Black church? Like, if you are a Black transracial adoptee and you're wondering how to start embracing your community, like, go to a Black church, a good Black church, but go to a Black church. Sis, I was fully embraced and accepted at that church, and I made some of the most meaningful friendships and relationships, ones that I still hold dear to this day. And I mean, also one of the most important and impactful experiences of my life happened at that church, and that was hearing the gospel of Jesus Christ and being saved. And I know that has nothing to do with race, but I would be remiss if I didn't say that, because it's part of who I am. And it was a huge turning point for me in those issues of immaturity and selfishness. They were not solved by being saved in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I did some of the worst things I've ever done after being saved. But it still was a catalyst for learning to love and accept myself because of the way that God saw me. If you want to hear more about my faith or about my journey in the church, I would be willing to share that, but I don't think that this video is necessarily the place that I'm wanting to share that, because again, it is adjacently like related to my racial identity, but not really. I don't think, well, actually, I don't believe in, I don't think it was a coincidence that one of the catalysts for some of the biggest changes in how I saw myself and how I loved myself were coinciding with the fact that I got saved. And so it would be inauthentic for me to leave that out. So if you know anything, I'm always just going to tell you what it is. Always. Another huge impact on my racial identity was singing in the gospel choir. Gospel is just such a window into the Black experience. And when you think about the fact that your ancestors sang these songs to endure things like slavery and segregation, Jim Crow, you name it, whatever it was, that your ancestors sang these songs to endure pain and trauma on that level, it just hits different. It just hits different. And so it meant more to me. Like singing Ride on King Jesus meant more to me than just whatever. Like it's deeper than that. And so I would encourage adoptees and white adoptive parents to involve their children or themselves in experiences that speak to your culture and to your history and to who your people are. Do things to help you understand who your people are, where you come from, the strength that is within you, that's in your blood, that's part of who you are, that makes you the resilient person that you are. It just helps you understand yourself. And so I'm forever grateful to my church, to the gospel choir for that. And again, nobody knows the depth of impact that had on me, because it was deeper than that to me. I think it's also helpful to mention that after my sophomore year of school, I married my husband, who is a Black man. And so even that was validating to me, like having love and intimacy with a Black man. True intimacy, not sexual intimacy, but like somebody really loving and choosing you, who looks like you and who can understand your experiences and wants to understand your experiences. Yeah. So shortly after I got married to Brett, I had my son Caleb, and so that was another thing. Like I had a Black son, and so that changes how you see the world and yourself, and what you're about. And then I changed my major to English. And a big part of me changing my major to English was because I took a women's studies class. So context, I was not a very good student. Obviously, I was like not a very good person my first, year of college. So I wasn't a very good student either. And I was dismissed from my undergraduate school. Yep, I got a letter and they were like, thank you for your money, bye, don't come back, you're not a good student. So my husband, who was then my boyfriend, helped me to have my dismissal appealed, and the academic probation was extended. So because I was not a good student, I was like, oh, I'm gonna take an easy class. I'm gonna just take this women's studies class, whatever. And so I took a women's studies class, and it changed my life. It changed my life. Like all of these experiences of racism and prejudice and just bias were all put into words that I could understand. I remember when we learned about the 7 levels of privilege. I'm going to try and list them now, but there's race, gender, sexuality, age, wealth, that's 5, ability, and religion. So those are the 7 levels of privilege. And basically, depending on where you fall within those levels of privilege, you either have a privilege or you have a disadvantage. And so like somebody who might be one of the most disadvantaged people in America is someone who is a trans black woman who's disabled and a Muslim. So like there are levels. It taught me about intersectionality, and so I understood how some of the experiences I had were not only because of race, but because of my gender and because of whatever, socioeconomic class, how parts of my privilege and disadvantage intersected. So it was transformational to me. And so I was like, oh, I'm about to do this women's studies stuff for real, for real. Like, let me add it. I got stuff to say. And so my school didn't offer a women's studies major. So I chose English as a major, and then I minored in women's studies. I was like, well, I'm just write everything I write about this. And so that's literally what I did. And so in my women's studies class and in my other classes, I read about Patricia Hill Collins. If you have not read anything by Patricia Hill Collins, I recommend you read I'm going to put the book right here, Black Feminist Thought. It's a collection of a bunch of wonderful things that she has to say. And she taught me about womanism, which is really Black feminism, and it literally transformed my life. I was like obsessed. I used to be in the library like literally reading until I fell asleep about this stuff, because it was like for the first time I felt seen and heard and understood. I was like, she knows me. She gets it. Like, I never had the words. I never had the terminology. I never had the mirror to see it. And so when I started reading these things and was like, yes, I'm experiencing this. I have experienced this. And now I know what it's called. It was like, I'm not bugging. Like, this is really a real thing, and people are writing things about it and have been writing things about it forever. When I was a senior in college, Michael Brown was killed, and I was outraged, especially with what I had just learned previously about race and identity and about Black feminist thought. I was like, I gotta do something about this. So I organized a die-in, which was a very popular form of protest after Michael Brown was killed, because he was killed and then laid on the ground for 4 hours before his body was retrieved. And so people, as a form of protest, laid on the floors of their college campus, whatever it was, a courtyard or a library or a dining hall, to protest the fact that this man was killed, first of all, wrongly by police, and then treated so inhumanely after they killed him. And so I organized a die-in, and that was really the beginning of my activism and community organization at that time. I always had wanted to be an activist, and again, shout out to my dad. My dad is a huge history buff, and so I always read about history, and when I would read history with him, I always would pick out things that interested me, and typically the things that interested me were with pictures of people who looked like me on them. So I was very much interested in the civil rights movement. And so my dad would buy me books about the civil rights movement. And I remember being like, if this happens when I'm alive, I'm going to be in the history books. Like, because I want to be that person who stands up for the right thing, who stands up for the underdog. And so when I had the opportunity to do so in school, I was like, yeah, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it. And so it happened. And then shortly after that, I organized a poetry event. And a kind of an open mic poetry performance event called Black Lives Matter. I did it in partnership with a group named Flowetry and with the fraternity Alpha Phi Alpha Incorporated as well, which is a Black fraternity. And so it was powerful. We organized a march to the event, and then a poetry event and performance. And it was a powerful experience, and I was happy to have been a part of that. I also joined the NAACP at my school shortly, but I did. And yeah, it was just a good time where I really worked on embracing my identity and trying to contribute to the community. And so all of that activism and learning about myself and learning about my people and our history led me to ultimately try and pair my activism with one of my biggest passions, which was educational inequity. So when I married my husband, and as I met my friends in college, most of my friends that I met in college were from Philly. Some were from Pittsburgh, but most were from Philly. And I couldn't help but notice how incredibly different my educational experience was from those people. I mean, they were just as smart, and they were just as brilliant as I was, but they didn't have the same resources as I did. And I just felt like that wasn't fair. It just wasn't fair. And so I started reading about educational inequity and the school to prison pipeline, you name it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to put this together, my community organization and activism and education. So my brother's girlfriend, now wife, but a girlfriend at the time, told me about an organization, which I will not name because I don't want to get sued by nobody, but an organization that is supposed to work against educational inequity by putting high-performing college students into low-performing high schools in some of the poorest and most least resourced places in America. So I was accepted into that organization, and I decided to teach in Philadelphia. So I taught for 3 years in North Philadelphia. I would have taught for longer if I wasn't fired, but that's another video. But I taught for 3 years, and it was a good experience. It was a hard experience, but it was a good experience. And it helped me understand myself and our people in an even more meaningful way. I mean, you can read about struggle all you want, but when it's sitting in front of you and you love it, it's your baby and you see it, it hit different. It really hits different. So that was my college experience. I know it was a lot of experiences, and it wasn't even scratching the surface of all of them at all. However, I think they all had this in common, and that is, for the first time in my life, I was experiencing a place where I felt like I belonged. For the first time in my life, I was existing within a space where I felt like I belonged. As a kid, a lot of times I felt like I stuck out, like I didn't belong, like I didn't fit in. And I just felt like I found my in-group, you know? I felt like I found a place where it was safe, and I had a community, and I had what I needed. And so I will be forever grateful to my college experience and to the people in my life that made me feel that way. You know who you are, and I love you. I was finally in a place where I was being understood. I was being heard. I was being seen. I was enough. And it was a place where I could be my authentic self. And people were like, yes, that's dope. Keep doing it. Like, it was so incredibly validating for me and for my racial identity. I know that this is not every TRA's experience when they go to a college, especially to a PWI. And I can't imagine what my experience would have been like had the people at IUP denied me or invalidated my racial identity or made me feel like I didn't belong. I can't even imagine. And so if that is your experience, like, share that or tell me about it. I want to hear about it. And I'm sorry that happened to you. but I can testify, or I can say that there are spaces that will find that there are spaces that will validate you and affirm who you are and love you for who you are. Because I found them, so they exist. College was a time of self-exploration for myself, and I'm grateful for every bit of it, even the hard stuff, because there was hard stuff. I think if my experience at IUP, if I wasn't embraced like I was at IUP, my experience would have been even more painful and traumatic than the previous experiences I had in my hometown. I'm grateful that I had the experience that I had in college. TRAs that went to college, comment below. What was your experience like? Did you go to a PWI? Did you go to an HBCU? If you did, how did you know about them? Like, I'm like shook. If you did, like, I'm shook. I didn't know what an HBCU was until I was already in school, which is a total bummer, because God, that would have been like litty. But I actually did think about this recently. Like, if I went to an HBCU, would I even have been accepted? Would they have hit me with the, like, girl, you're not even black? If so, that would have been devastating. So maybe it's good I didn't go. I don't know. So that was that. That was my episode about my college experience. I hope that it made sense. I feel like it was kind of like all over the place. So if it didn't make sense, I'm sorry. I really am sorry. If you don't already know, I release new content every other Wednesday. So make sure you hit that subscribe button so that you can be notified when I release my next video, because another video is coming. Another one's coming. I really enjoyed telling these stories because they really are a lot of feel-good stories to me, of just being like, I belong somewhere. Yes, thank you. So sharing that is like, yeah, life-giving. Much better than those other sad behind times in my life. I hope that you liked this video. If you did, I want you to hit that thumbs up button. If you want to hear more about my college experience, let me know in the comments, because I got way more stories than the ones that I just shared. Please make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in 2 Wednesdays. Until then, peace. What it do, baby? You ready? Are you ready? I'm your host, Hannah Matthews. Dog. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Yeah, it's a thing. I'm doing it now every time, so whatever. What you gonna do?